I've never been a particularly paranoid person, but that night, something just felt wrong. My parents had gone out to the country, leaving me alone in our house. A rare event, but nothing extraordinary. They were due back on Tuesday, so I'd have the house to myself for a couple of nights. I'd planned on binge-watching a new series until I was too tired to keep my eyes open. Monday night dragged on. The clock read 3 a.m., and exhaustion finally started to weigh down my eyelids. Before I went to bed, I locked the gate outside and brought one of our cats, a black, fluffy ball of comfort, into my room. I figured his soft purring would help me fall asleep faster. I barely remember drifting off, but what I do remember, what I can't forget, is waking up in the dark to the sound of something scratching and shuffling in the hallway outside my room. It sounded like the frantic skittering of claws on the hardwood floors. My mind immediately went to our other cat, who must have been causing the ruckus. Feeling groggy, I reached over and tried to turn on my night light, but nothing happened. It took me a second to realize it wasn't just the night light. The main overhead light wouldn't work either. "Power's out," I mumbled, making a mental note to check the circuit breaker in the morning. Then, to my surprise, I noticed the motion-activated light in the hallway flicked on. Groggy but curious, I shuffled out of bed and opened my door, expecting to see the cat tearing up some imaginary prey in the hallway. Instead, I saw people. Not just anyone, though. They were familiar faces, the friends of my parents, the ones who occasionally visited for dinner or coffee, and a few of my own friends, too. They were scattered around the hallway, standing there in eerie silence, their faces blank and their eyes wide. My mother was in the kitchen, talking with her best friend as if it were completely normal for everyone to be in our house in the middle of the night. What's going on?" I stammered, the words barely making it out of my mouth. "Oh, we just decided to get together," my mother said with a warm smile, though something about her voice felt off, like it was too cheerful. "Wanted to come home a bit earlier and bring some friends, but I tried to wrap my mind around it. The gate was locked. I locked it myself. How did you all get in?" No one answered. Instead, the group turned as one, their faces suddenly expressionless. I opened my mouth to ask again, but before I could get another word out, I woke up. I was back in my bed, shrouded in darkness, the room silent except for the cat's faint breathing beside me. My heart pounded as I lay there, disoriented and trying to process the dream. Or was it a nightmare? Whatever it was, it felt disturbingly real. In my half-awake haze, I reached for the light switch, still shaken from the eerie scene I'd just witnessed in my dream. But as I clicked it, the lamp refused to light up, exactly like before. A chill ran down my spine. My hand trembled as I touched the nightstand, feeling for my phone. I needed to know that this time I was really awake. I needed something to ground me. Suddenly, I heard the same skittering, scratching noise in the hallway. My heart raced as I remembered the group of people standing outside my room in the dream. In the silence, I could almost feel their eyes on me. "No," I whispered to myself, fighting the wave of terror. "This can't be happening again. It's just a dream." But the motion sensor light in the hallway turned on, casting a faint glow beneath my door. I forced myself out of bed, pinching my arm hard as I walked toward the door. Pain shot through my skin, grounding me momentarily, assuring me that I was awake. Yet the fear wouldn't loosen its grip on me. When I opened the door, a shiver crawled down my spine. Standing in the hallway, just like before, were my parents' friends, and my own. They looked at me, their faces expressionless, eyes empty. "Mom," I called out, my voice shaky. She turned to me, her smile too wide, her voice disturbingly cheerful. "Oh, honey, you're awake. We thought we'd have a little party. But how did you get in?" I asked again, dread rising in my throat. "The gate. It's locked." Her smile widened, stretching her face inhumanly. "Doors and gates don't stop us, dear." That's when I knew. This wasn't real, couldn't be real. I started to scream, desperate to wake up, to claw my way back to reality. I slapped myself, hard, feeling my skin sting, but nothing changed. The faces in the hallway stayed fixed on me, their eyes gleaming with something dark and unsettling. After what felt like an eternity of struggling, everything faded to black, and I finally jolted awake. I woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for breath as if I'd just escaped drowning. My heart thudded against my chest, my fingers trembling as I reached for the bedside lamp. This time, blessedly, it flickered to life, casting a warm glow over the room. The cat looked up at me, blinking sleepily, probably annoyed by my sudden movements. I chuckled weakly, relieved by the familiarity of his presence. It was over, I told myself. Just a nightmare. Terrible, surreal nightmare. What are you staring at? I mumbled, trying to calm myself. It was just a dream, all right? I'm fine. The cat continued to stare at me, his eyes glinting in the soft light. Then, without warning, he opened his mouth and spoke in a low, gravelly voice. Are you sure it's finished? My blood froze. Thought we'd just let you go, he continued, his tone dripping with menace, the voice distinctly human and unmistakably mocking. I screamed, leaping out of bed, scrambling backward until I hit the wall. The cat's eyes stayed fixed on me, unblinking, his mouth twisted into a smile, a horrifying human smile. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to process what was happening. I pinched my arms, slapped myself, desperate to wake up, but nothing changed. The cat sat there, grinning at me, as if amused by my terror. I closed my eyes, willing myself to wake up, pleading with my mind to snap out of whatever nightmare this was. But the room stayed the same, the cat's unholy voice echoing in my ears. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the room began to blur, and I was thrust back into the black void. I woke up for what felt like the 100th time that night, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. This time I didn't dare move. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to check if the cat was still beside me, too terrified to see if the lamp would turn on. Am I awake? I whispered into the silence, almost hoping for an answer. There was no response, only silence, thick and suffocating. Slowly, I reached for my phone, desperate for a connection to the real world. I needed to know the time to see some proof that I was truly awake. But when I unlocked my phone, the screen was blank. No apps, no notifications, just a black void. Panic set in again, and I struggled to control my breathing. I forced myself out of bed, stumbling toward the kitchen. Every step felt like wading through mud, my legs heavy and sluggish. The air was thick with an oppressive presence, something watching, waiting. When I reached the kitchen, I saw my mother's silhouette standing by the window, staring out into the night. Relief washed over me. Mom, I called out, my voice breaking. Mom, I'm so glad you're here. She turned slowly, her face hidden in shadow. And then, in a voice that wasn't hers, she whispered, you can't escape us. I backed away, my heart racing. I turned and ran back to my room, slamming the door shut behind me, desperate to wake up from whatever nightmare this was. I pinched myself, slapped my cheeks, did everything I could to jolt myself out of it. Then, I heard a soft, mocking laughter coming from behind me. You're not going anywhere, the voice whispered. I woke up, or at least I thought I did, lying in bed with the light on. My heart was racing, my mind reeling from the endless nightmare cycles. I was still trembling, but I forced myself to sit up, trying to convince myself that it was over. The room felt wrong. It was my bedroom, but the air was thick and heavy, as though the walls themselves were pressing in on me. Just breathe, I whispered to myself. Just breathe. Then, slowly, I turned to the side of the bed where the cat lay. This time, the cat was gone. Instead, a figure stood at the foot of my bed. A shadow, dark and featureless, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. It loomed over me, watching, its gaze piercing through me as if reading every hidden fear in my soul. You think you can escape? It whispered, its voice layered with an echo that reverberated through my mind. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to move, but my body was frozen, paralyzed by an unseen force. And then, as the darkness closed in, I realized the horrifying truth. I was still asleep, I was trapped in this endless nightmare, unable to wake up, unable to escape. The last thing I saw was the shadow leaning closer, its face splitting into a grotesque grin. As it whispered, "Welcome home." The room faded to black, and I knew, in the depths of my soul, that I was never waking up. The sunlight filtered through my window, casting a warm glow over my room. I lay in bed, still trembling, the events of the nightmare lingering at the edge of my mind. But this time, I felt a strange emptiness, like a piece of me was missing. I tried to remember something specific, something about my family or my friends, but the details were hazy, like a picture that had been erased and redrawn. Had I really made a deal with the shadow, or was that part of the dream, too? The thought sent chills down my spine. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself it was just my imagination. After all, I was awake now. The nightmare was over, or so I thought. The day unfolded with a peculiar sense of wrongness. I couldn't quite place it at first. Everything looked the same: my room, the furniture, even the cat lying in its usual sunspot on the floor. But the feeling of disorientation remained, like I was seeing everything through a fog. I decided to go outside, hoping the fresh air might clear my head. As I stepped out, the world felt muted. The colors seemed washed out, and there was an eerie silence, as if all sound had been sucked out of the environment. I walked down the street, recognizing familiar faces, but each person I passed avoided eye contact, their expressions blank. I tried to greet an old neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, but she walked past me as if I didn't exist. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing strangely in the empty air. But no one responded. No one even acknowledged me. Panic crept in. Was I really awake? Or had I traded my freedom in that nightmare only to wake up in another twisted reality? Days, or what I thought were days, blurred together as I wandered through my new, distorted world. I returned home, hoping to find solace, but every night, I found myself unable to sleep. Each time I closed my eyes, I heard that familiar voice, whispering from the shadows. A piece of you, a memory. The emptiness I felt grew deeper with each passing day. Friends called my phone, but their voices were strange, distant, as if I was listening to them from underwater. I struggled to remember their names, their faces. They would tell stories, laugh at shared memories, and I would smile along, pretending to understand. But in truth, those memories felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. I tried reaching out to my family, but even they seemed different, distant. My mother's voice sounded hollow when she spoke to me. When I asked her about our last vacation together, she hesitated, as though she couldn't remember either. And then, one night, as I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadow returned. "You're not satisfied," it whispered, its voice dripping with amusement. I sat up, glaring into the darkness. "What did you do to me?" The shadow laughed, a deep, guttural sound that reverberated through the room. "I took what you offered, a memory, precious one. But if you want it back, we can make another deal." I clenched my fists, anger and fear twisting together in my chest. "No more deals. I want my life back." The shadow's grin widened, its eyes glinting with malevolent delight. "Then you'll have to find it within the darkness." With those cryptic words, it vanished, leaving me alone with a hollow ache where my memories used to be. The next night, I prepared myself for what I had to do. If the shadow wanted me to search within the darkness, then that's exactly what I would do. I had to confront it, to demand my memories back, to reclaim the parts of myself that had been stolen. I turned off every light in the house, plunging myself into absolute darkness. My heart pounded as I stood in the center of my room, the silence pressing down on me. I closed my eyes, focusing on the shadow's mocking voice, letting the memory of it guide me. After what felt like an eternity, I felt the air shift. The shadows around me thickened, coiling and writhing like living entities. I opened my eyes, and there it was, looming in the corner of my room, its grin wider and more sinister than ever. "You came back," it whispered, a note of amusement in its voice. "You took something from me," I replied, my voice steady. I want it back. The shadow tilted its head, considering me with those sickly yellow eyes. Very well, it said. But you'll need to offer something in return. A life for a life, a memory for a memory. Are you willing to pay the price? I hesitated, but I knew I couldn't live with this emptiness gnawing at me. Yes, the shadow stretched out a hand, its fingers impossibly long and thin. Then take my hand, and let us journey deeper. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I clasped its cold, bony hand. Instantly, the darkness swallowed me, pulling me down into an endless void. I found myself standing in a twisted landscape, a vast, endless expanse of shadow and fog. Fragments of memories drifted past me, like ghosts trapped in the mist. I saw flashes of my childhood, moments of laughter with friends, and glimpses of my family's faces, all floating out of reach, taunting me. The shadow stood beside me, its presence as heavy as lead. This is where your memories dwell, it murmured. Fragments, lost in the void. You can reclaim them if you dare. I walked forward, reaching for one of the memories, a scene of me and my parents laughing together. But as my fingers brushed it, the image flickered and distorted, revealing the shadow's grinning face beneath. You can never truly escape, it hissed, its voice filling the air. You made a bargain, and you will live with the consequences. I felt a surge of rage and defiance. No, this ends here. I closed my eyes, focusing on the fragments around me, willing them to return to me. I could feel the memories, the pieces of myself, slipping through my fingers like sand. But I held on, pulling them closer, refusing to let go. The shadow screamed, its form distorting as I drew my memories back, reclaiming them one by one. The void trembled, the mist swirling violently around us. I could feel the shadow's grip weakening, its presence fading as I reclaimed my identity, my life. Finally, with one last surge of willpower, I tore myself free, ripping away from the darkness and leaving the shadow behind. I awoke in my bed, the morning sunlight streaming through the window. I lay there, breathing heavily, feeling the familiar warmth of the real world around me. My memories were hazy, but they were there, like pieces of a shattered mirror slowly coming back together. The shadow was gone, its presence nothing more than a lingering whisper in the back of my mind. But as I looked around my room, I noticed something strange. A single black feather lying on my pillow, its edges shimmering with an unnatural darkness. The shadow had left its mark, a reminder of the price I had paid. And though I had escaped, I knew deep down that it was never truly over. Because sometimes, the darkest parts of ourselves are the hardest to escape, and the shadows have a way of returning when we least expect it.